I can't remember when I first learned about efforts to change the law in Georgia, but I do remember hearing the story of Courtney Humbaugh, a Georgia-born adoptee who told me that she and her attorney had petitioned a court in Georgia and ultimately received more than 100 pages of her adoption records in addition to a copy of her original birth certificate. I was blown away. So I had to get her on an Adoptees United program, and we did that last year.
I petitioned the courts in Georgia last year. So my original birth certificate is hot off the press, I guess you could say.
Since that time, Courtney and Jamie Weiss and other advocates have been working to introduce legislation in the state to change the law and make the OBC available upon request. I sat down with Jamie Weiss and talked about her history and the efforts underway in Georgia today to restore a right all adopted people in the state once had, the right to request and obtain their own original birth records. I'm Gregory Luce, and this is What Next, the Adoptee Rights Podcast. Each week we talk about the state of adoptee rights around the globe, including a weekly companion newsletter that outlines any new developments. We've got a great program today and a number of great programs in the next few weeks, so we're glad to have you here. Jamie, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your, what I call a backstory, and also what brought you to the work you're doing now in Georgia.
I am Jamie Weiss. I am a domestic infant adoptee from Georgia. I was actually born in Virginia, but adopted in Georgia. So these days I'm a mom to two girls and married. We love living in the Tennessee mountains now, but very excited to work with our committee in Georgia for the Georgia Alliance for Adoptee Rights to hopefully give adoptees like myself access to our original birth certificates.
So you have actually one of the what I call complicated cases where you're born in one place and that's where your original birth record is, and then you're adopted in another where all your adoption records are, particularly the court files, and that it's likely the court files have a copy of your original birth record. So have you tried to get your original birth record in Virginia, for instance, since you found out you may have one?
I didn't know that I would have a different birth certificate.
I didn't either.
Just a few years ago.
I think I was 35. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was somewhere about that age. So I had no idea that existed. And the first step or first thing I eventually found out was that Georgia has the Georgia Adoption Reunion Registry.
Right.
And so in Georgia, you can adoptees, birth or first parents, you can register with the registry. And if you both register, they're supposed to be able to match you up. They can look at your files and give you your non-identifying information. So that would be the information about your birth and adoption that doesn't include names such as, parent names or your original name or anything like that. It's a general story.
Right. It's sort of the classic mutual consent registries.
Right.
Right.
So they can do that. And so I sent to them to get my non-identifying information. And I got that, which is, it's a summary of, someone there at the registry can look at my file. They can see everything. Although I can't see it, they can see it, and they can give me a summary of it, which I got. And that is when they told me that my birth certificate was not in the file. Now, they said that wasn't that unusual for a private adoption because mine was through a private arrangement before I was born through an attorney in Atlanta.
Right.
So they said that wasn't that unusual, but of course, that was a little disheartening. I was hoping to at least know it was there, wondering now what happened to it, which got my wheels turning and thinking maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe it does exist in Virginia somewhere. I don't know. I was like, I don't know how this works. I think still Virginia is closed as well. So I'm thinking they would know I was adopted and not be able to get anything. But and I can't because I'm a different person than I was born as, right?
Right.
So Jamie can't try to get Hope's birth certificate because Jamie's not Hope. Jamie is Hope, but Jamie's not Hope, right?
Right. And the clients I've had that have interstate placements like yours, they get into sort of an impossible spot where you can't really petition a court in, let's say, Virginia to obtain the release of your original birth record, because the courts there will say, well, you weren't adopted here. And then you can't get it in Georgia because they'll say, well, we don't have it. And so go to Virginia to get it. Virginia says go to Georgia to get a court order, and you're stuck in between. And it's the most complicated cases I handle on the birth record issue. Yeah, so yeah, I'm sure that's what you're dealing with.
Long story short, I asked my maternal grandmother, my biological maternal grandmother, who still lives in Virginia, if she might attempt to get it for me. I had no idea if it would even exist. That in Georgia, they didn't have it in my file. And on Ancestry, I was able to see that my name and my birth date was listed in the birth index for Virginia.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So your birth name was listed in the published index, just like New York and some other states that have these indexes. Yeah.
Yeah. Never had thought about that. I didn't even know about birth indexes. I didn't know about any of this. But when I saw that and I put that together, it's like, okay, my name's in this birth index. My birth certificate's not in my file in Georgia. So they do have a record of me in Georgia. I mean, in Virginia, under my birth name and date and all of that stuff. So I asked my biological grandmother if she would attempt to get it for me, because she can get it because she's related to me.
Right.
And I'm not. So I still didn't know, okay, are they going to say, oh no, this person was adopted and sealed and you can't have it, or what? But lo and behold, she called me one day and it came in her mailbox.
Really?
Really?
It's so interesting sometimes. I think,
adopted.
Right. And I think sometimes the clerks get these things in the mail or whatever with the form and a fee, and they just process it and don't really think about it. And maybe that's what happened in your case. I don't know.
I think Virginia even knows I was adopted. I think Virginia just thinks there's another person that's wandering around out there. I don't know what they think happened to that person, but
right.
I don't think they think I'm adopted. There is nothing. It is a straight up birth certificate.
Oh, so you can go out and like be your own a different person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I literally exist as two different people, technically, according to birth certificate.
Well, do you mind sharing what your birth name was? I mean, you don't have to say the last name, but
yeah, sure. It was Hope Marie.
So you could probably get an ID with Hope Marie on it, I assume. You could go to school on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a birth certificate.
Right. Exactly.
How you start? I don't know.
I think that's one reason why we get non-certified, even though I think what happens typically in the states that release the original birth records, they'll have a big stamp on it saying can't be used for identification purposes. But I mean, I do think we should get certified copies, because that just says that this is the correct information that exists in the office. So that's just the difference. But that's cool that you got a certified copy of your original birth record from your maternal grandmother.
I still legally am not allowed to go get it, though.
Right. Oh, yeah. And Virginia has a funky system where you have to go through the state agency, and then they have to approve it or disapprove it. And then if they disapprove it, you have to show good cause. And I think in Virginia, you have to notify potentially your adoptive parents that you're seeking your original birth record. If the agency says, nope, you can't get it, you have to notify everybody, which is crazy. I can't imagine notifying my adoptive parents or anyone. Hey, I'm going after my own birth record. What do you think? Yeah.
Right. We're forever. If you're adopted, so you're forever a child, right?
Right. Yeah.
You have to have someone's permission to find out about yourself.
Well, how did you find your maternal grandmother?
Let's see. Well, so my adoptive mom, during the process of my adoption, which it was closed and secret and all of that, but she had gotten an envelope that had some information in it and apparently steamed it open. And it had my biological mom's name, her dad's name, my biological mom's date of birth, and a P.O. box. I think that was all that was pretty much there. And so I used that information to search, and it took me about 10 years of trying to search through the internet to find different things. Again, I wasn't aware of the registry.
Right.
I wasn't aware of getting non-identifying information. I didn't know I had another birth certificate. I didn't know any of that. All I knew is that I had this person to try and find. And the internet was new when I first started searching. So it was around 97 when I graduated from high school, went off to college.
So you started searching early. I mean, you started searching in your early 20s.
Immediately.
That hasn't been my experience in talking with other adult adopted people, although I think we need to pay more attention to those who are, in their late teens, early 20s and what they want. But that's interesting that you did that right away.
Oh, sure. I would have wanted to know my whole life. I would have wanted to know. So immediately when I went off to college, had internet access, a computer, that was my first real ability to have the internet and a computer. I started looking everywhere that I could, everything I could find. And you get, you look on and off because you look for a while and you can't find something, and then you've got to do normal life things. And then I would come back to it. And so eventually over time, and well, I should say the information that I had came to me third hand. So it wasn't given to me by my parents.
Right.
They wouldn't have wanted me to have it. We didn't really talk about it, and it was definitely an issue. So, but somehow, for some reason, they told my college boyfriend.
Uh-huh. Well, wait, they told your college boyfriend, but not you?
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's when I actually got that information. But again, it came to me, secondhand, or however you want to say.
So well, everything's mediated, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't necessarily 100% sure. Like maybe when I'm not finding things, well, maybe he told me incorrectly. Maybe he remembered wrong. I mean, who knows, but eventually it was about 10 years. Eventually my mom did finally give me the information that she had, where she had written it down, which confirmed, okay, this is the correct information I'm looking for. So I pushed forward with another search and just immediately found her right after that.
Right. So this is a question I actually don't like getting half the time, and I sometimes don't like asking it. It's because when I get the question, I have to answer that, yes, I'm in reunion with my birth mother, but she died 6 months after we met. And then the conversation kind of just goes away. But are you in reunion?
Yes, yeah. I am with both my mom and her family and my dad and his family.
Right. Okay. Well, good. Have you been involved in adoptee rights for quite some time, or is this foray into doing more in Georgia something new for you?
I just reunited with my dad in 2017. And so that was like the final part of my surge and reunion and all of that. And so I wasn't really able to do a lot of processing of things until after that. And it's been in that time frame in these last 5 years that I have learned so much about the rights that I didn't know I didn't have.
Right.
Like I said, knowing that I had a name and knowing I had another birth certificate and all of those things. And so, I mean, once I have learned those things, then I've definitely been just kind of, dove into it all and have been trying to learn as much as possible and change things where I can. But I have never done any sort of, political legislation work, any of that before. So it's completely new to me for doing that.
Right. And then, so that kind of segues into, do you call it GAR when in shorthand, or yes. GAAR? But the Georgia, what is it again? The Georgia Alliance? Georgia
Alliance for Adoptee Rights.
And then tell me how that came about. I know that Courtney Humbaugh was supposed to be with us, but she couldn't today. And she's a Georgia adoptee who actually, we had her on an Adoptees United event where she talked about hiring an attorney and getting her original birth records plus quite a bit of agency records. But Tell me a little bit about what brought you together with Courtney and others, and where you are now with GAAR.
Yeah, sure. So, prior to the interview that you did with Courtney, another person and I, Catherine, we had discussed putting something like this together, and that was right, kind of, just those few months before really COVID started kicking in and everything. It was somewhere in that 2019 round, and everybody's lives were a little bit in upheaval, and I think maybe even Catherine too, we might have even tried to contact you at one point in time about, hey, is there any information on Georgia or anybody working on that? But then the interview came up with Courtney, and in that I had contacted Courtney to ask her something as well. And through that interview and just me contacting her, she then had asked me, hey, do you want to join up and do this in Georgia, and let's see if we can, change the laws and have adoptees be able to obtain their original birth certificates. And of course, it was an immediate yes for me.
I mean, could you, just so we can plug it, but what's the website address for the organization?
It's Georgia, GA for Georgia, Alliance for AdopteeRights.org.
And then we'll put this in our newsletter as well as it goes out, so people can people can contact you through that website.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. And then, I mean, you have what looks like a really great committee and working on this issue, including an adoptive parent who's actually a person who has drafted a lot of Georgia's adoption-related laws. Is a bill being circulated, or is that something that's still being worked on to determine how best to draft one?
Yeah, so first, our committee, we've really been blessed with the way it has come together, and are really, really pleased with it and really proud of all of our members. We do have a diverse committee as far as we have adoptees. We also have birth or first parents and an adoptive parent as well. So we also have so there was some previous legislation work going on, and there, I think 2010 to 12, somewhere in there, for a group that was called GEAR. And so we also have Nikki Barker from GEAR, who she has joined us in this work, which is great because she's already, worked a few times, and she knows, what they did and what did work or didn't work, or how we might adjust. So we've got her. And then we also have Jim Outman, who he also had previously helped to work on this legislation. Now he's an attorney in Atlanta, and he has been involved in basically all of the adoption legislation that has been going on in Georgia since the 70s. Yeah, so Jim's, part of the Georgia Adoption Lawyers Association, and all of these things, and he's been involved in literally all of it that has
I want to, so this is sort of just a tangential, but I think what I should talk to him about it, because I've always wondered about this one provision in Georgia law where the place of birth after the adoption can be changed to the resident, not the address, but the resident or town where the adoptive parents live, which is crazy to me, because then suddenly you weren't born in that town or city. You're born somewhere else. It has to be within Georgia. It can't change a birth from Virginia to Georgia. But I'd love to talk to him about that. Has he talked to you about that?
Yes, that in Georgia, adoptive parents, upon the adoption, can choose what the city of birth will say on the new birth certificate that is issued, as any city in Georgia. So, for instance, I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. My birth certificate, my amended, birth certificate I got after the adoption, it says that I was born in, actually it doesn't even have a city, it just says Clayton County, Georgia.
Wait, your amended certificate?
Oh, yes.
What state is it issued from?
Georgia.
You have a amended birth certificate issued from the state of Georgia.
Yes.
But you were born in Virginia.
Correct.
Wow, that I've come across that occasionally,
Mhm.
and I think it's really rare, but I can't imagine having to deal with that.
Mhm. So
I
even
mean,
when you
so
call
that's
from
why you
there,
talk about being Hope Marie over here, and then you're
oh,
Jamie Weiss over here,
oh,
and you're two different people.
I'm legit like I'm Hope Marie from Virginia and Jamie Lee
Because
from.
I just said that no, you couldn't be born in Virginia and then your birthday place changed in Georgia, but you just said no, that's what happened. Yeah,
And
wow.
I know. Let's see. So Stuart Watson is another one of our committee members. I know his birth certificate. He was born in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and then his parents, chose it to be probably where they lived. But it doesn't even have to be where the adoptive parents live or anything. I mean, they can literally just say, "We want to say you were born in Savannah, Georgia, or
Right. Pick the
Rome,
best
Georgia."
best
Anywhere,
sounding town. Yeah, I mean, oh yeah,
anywhere.
that's a great town. Let's have them born there.
Right. So most are going to choose where they live at the time
Right. Yeah.
because that obviously makes the most sense. But
Yeah,
but yeah, they can
I'd
choose
love
any.
to I'd love to pick his brain about why is that in there? That's kind of crazy. That's the only state I know of that allows that to happen. I mean, it may have
I think there's a few. I don't know which ones they are, but I think there are. Maybe a
maybe
handful.
a couple more. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Um back to the whether a bill has been drafted or is circulating, or how can you talk about that process a little bit, how you go about doing that?
Sure. So Jim Outman, the attorney that we're working with, he essentially has a bill drafted from where they've tried to do this before, and it's just a matter of we're currently working to secure a really good sponsor for the
Right.
bill.
Right.
And so, the sponsor will probably want to look it over, make sure it's all, good to go. But essentially the bill is drafted.
Right. Has it affected at all, whether it's Jim's opinion or people on the committee, that like Courtney's experience where she hired an attorney? It wasn't that hard actually to get her original birth record and her agency records. Does that influence the discussion at all? That it's, it doesn't seem to be a big deal with the courts at least.
Yes. So Jim, I believe, said that he has not really had an issue with any cases he's taken on to have them get the birth certificate. It's totally up to each individual judge.
Right.
There's no
And that's
real
part of the
set standard
problem.
there.
Yeah.
And I believe that Lila Bradley was the attorney that Courtney Humbaugh had worked with to get her records, and she's also been very successful. So it really doesn't seem as if you petition the court, if you have an attorney and petition the court, that they have much of an issue, releasing your birth certificate or your records. But that costs a lot of money and a lot of time,
right.
which is a burden on the adoptees that anyone else doesn't have. They can simply fill out a form, pay their fee, and get the birth certificate. So
I'm glad you clarified that, because that is the huge difference. And and it's been my experience too. And I think what happens is you present the facts to the court. And so when I represent adoptees in Minnesota, you present the facts to the court, you get the story together, and the court says, this is dumb. Of course we're going to release the records because the alternative is worse. And typically the alternative is continuing the search process that essentially outs birth parents in front of the entire family. And
right.
so, I think that's probably what's happening with these court cases with Jim and, is it Lila, you said?
Yes, Lila Bradley.
Yeah, and I think we have in the event with Courtney, we have links to her website as well. Yeah. So bills being considered. It sounds like it's not going to be introduced in 2022, which I think is a good idea. It gives you more time to organize.
Since we're in the middle of a session and it's an election year, so they're trying to get out of session probably fairly quickly, so they can move on to campaigning.
Right.
We were originally planning for 2023, but then hoping maybe 2022 will work. But
right. And I was peripherally involved in this in the beginning, and very quickly, you all started doing all the right things. You got a great website. You formed a really strong committee. And I think that, I mean, that's what Adoptees United was all about, was getting these efforts started and letting the folks who know best handle what's happening in that state. So it's been really impressive to watch it grow and develop. And I think you must have did you do the website? It's a great website.
Did. Mhm.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. And so, yeah, and my thought too was 2022 would not be a good year, and I'm not really advising people in other states unless they know something could happen that's positive, because well, as you said, it's an election year for almost all states, and it's I think what happens in 2022 may set the tone for future, at least for the next 2 years after that. And I'm hoping in Minnesota we flip the Senate here, because that's been the barrier for our bill. And I assume there's some races you may be watching in Georgia as well. So that sort of gets to, is there any opposition that you know of, or that you think that you're going to have to overcome in Georgia as you sort of begin to organize and plan?
So it doesn't appear that there is any organized opposition, because it's the not American Adoption Congress, what's the
No, they would be in favor of a good.
Right, they're in favor. Yeah, it's not them. I just can't think of.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, so
anyway, there's a national adoption.
I wonder if it's National Conference for Adoption, which I don't think they oppose this stuff anymore. They just don't do anything about it.
No, I think it was them, and they actually sent people in to oppose.
Interesting.
The bill, but now have said they will no longer do that.
Right, but at the same time, they won't support it.
Right.
Yeah. And so that has often, I mean, I'll take it or leave it on that, but I'd rather they not butt in and make a problem.
Sure.
But I don't want what I have a hard time with, and I bet you will have this in Georgia, is I call them whisper campaigns, where you don't have any known opposition, but people are behind the scenes trying to defeat the bill, which is pretty typical. But
I said there's no organized opposition, right. But and it's not an opposition, but there's a concern amongst some people that there were promises made to birth or first mothers or parents to have anonymity.
Right.
And the fact is that the forms that were signed, the relinquishment form that were signed all the way back from at least the 70s moving forward, they're exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And the language does not ever give them any promise or guarantee of secrecy or anonymity.
Right.
So someone could definitely tell them whatever they want to tell them, but it doesn't make it legal.
Right. Yeah, and I think what an event we want to do on Adoptees United is the political messaging on this issue. And the idea, and maybe we'll involve you all as well, because you've probably thought through some of that messaging within Georgia. But what I would like to have is, and I've talked to other adoptees about this, a messaging sheet, so that when opposition says this, the best response is this. And you're going to get all those. I mean, this. You're going to get all these whataboutisms as you raise this issue. What about the birth parent? What about, weren't they promised, eternal anonymity? And we need to have solid, quick answers to those every time it comes up. Yeah.
So there was no promise of anonymity. Most had no idea that there would be even, changes in birth certificates. And the research actually shows most would like for this to happen, that they would like for birth certificates to be opened.
Right.
Many are upset that they can't even get a copy of the birth certificate for their child to show that, they did physically give birth to a child.
Yeah. And I can't remember if Georgia may have this too, but many states have it so that the adoptive parents are actually the parents that decide whether to have a new birth certificate issued or not. And it's not up to And so essentially, it's not the birth parent that's insisting on a new and sort of secret birth record. They're out of the picture at that point. It's the adoptive parents, and I can't remember if Georgia has that provision or not. But I'll follow up on that and put it in the notes to the show. So
another thing on that note too is that once a biological parent had signed a relinquishment form, that relinquishment form purely relinquished the child and ended their rights. It didn't guarantee that we would be adopted. It doesn't guarantee the child would be adopted. And so our records, our birth certificates are not changed or sealed until we're actually adopted. So it's the act of being adopted that seals the records and changes the birth certificate. So should we have been cared for through foster care for however long, a lengthy amount of time, or even our entire childhood, should we have never been adopted, instead under like a legal guardianship, or any other type of care other than being adopted, our birth certificate would still be intact.
Right. And in some states it would be public. I mean, if you were in foster care, for instance, for 2 or 3 years, that your birth certificate in some states is public and publicly available for that entire period until adoption. Yeah, exactly. I think legislators get that. Some don't. Some are just sort of, they won't take any argument. And I think that, and I've said this many times, I think, and I imagine you'll run into this in Georgia as well. I tend to think that it's the older legislators who have memories or thoughts about the myth that existed back especially for white families, the myth of redeeming yourself after an unwed child by forgetting about it and being promised allegedly that no one would ever know about this ever again.
Right.
And so I think it's those older legislators who have memories of that or buy into that are the issues. And the younger legislators, they just see it like the young generations now think about all sorts of different issues. Like, what's the big deal? Yeah. And I think that seems to be the parameters of what controls this issue. And so obviously, as legislators sort of age out, I think we're getting a newer look at these. I will say that with one caveat, and that is, I'm not sure what's going to happen in abortion politics coming up, especially if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, and I think that's going to create some real issues for us as well. Yeah, but I'm going to be looking at that very carefully, but it's obviously out of our control. We'll see. Yeah.
Right.
The safe haven law mentioned by Justice Coney Barrett.
Two completely separate issues.
Exactly.
They want to conflate them. Yes.
Right. I don't want that to come up as an issue in our advocacy. And I tend to say, well, when it does, I tend to say, well, that's not an issue that is before the committee. If you want to talk about abortion rights, you might want to go over to the Judiciary Committee and talk about it over there. But that's not something that that exists in this issue, this legal right issue for adult adopted people. Yeah. So over the next year until after elections, I guess, what's the plan? Are you meeting regularly?
We are. We typically meet about once a month. That way we can decide, what tasks need to be done by who to move us forward to the next place that we need to be at. We're also just currently, our biggest thing is working to find a sponsor for the bill. We do have a commitment from a representative to co-sponsor the bill.
Mm-hmm.
That she would just prefer to not be the main sponsor because she has other things on her plate.
Right.
So, she's lending us a hand and helping in that realm, as well as we have some, contacts we're working to get in touch with some other senators and representatives as well. So we'll be working on that. And then also just working in general to build the awareness of this issue. So many people don't know about it. I mean, even adoptees ourselves. And so working to build the awareness and then just support so that when it does come time for 2023, that we have the citizens of Georgia backing us and contacting their legislators and saying, hey, this needs to be done. This wrong needs to be righted, right? These adoptees deserve to
and I
be
think
able to obtain their records.
and that's critical to have that education part for at least a year.
Mhm.
So it's not something coming out of the blue, because I don't think a lot of legislators even know. Or in fact, I know that they don't know. They're surprised often when they hear that this is what happens, and after an adoption, and then you actually don't have access, or you don't have the right to obtain your record. So I'm glad that you guys are doing that. That's great. One thing I think you sent out, GAR sent out requests for videos, and I think I owe you one actually. Are you still doing that? Okay, so you're taking little short videos, and what do you want people to say in that video?
So we're looking for videos, and also if someone doesn't want to do a video, they're also welcome to submit a written statement as well. But we would love just to hear from adoptees especially, but also birth and first parents, adoptive parents. I mean, anyone that is in that adoption constellation, about how this having original birth certificate sealed, how that has affected them, what it would mean to them to be able to obtain it and have that opened.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And they can reach any of you through the GAR website?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And we'll have that in the notes to the show as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I really appreciate you talking with me, Jamie. And then I'm sure we may have you and Courtney and others back as this happens, maybe next year or even over the course of this year, as we see things develop. And I hope they develop positively. Adoptees United is helping out in a small way by hosting the website, but that's what we do. We do some logistics, infrastructure, back work, and let other people who know what's best for their state do the grunt work, really. So appreciate you all doing that.
You. Yeah, we appreciate you and your support, and all of the adoptees in other states that have gone before us and have given us knowledge and tips that they have from doing that as well. We're very optimistic. We feel like things are in that realm. There have been several states that have changed over just the last couple of years to allow adoptees to obtain their birth certificates. So I feel like it's kind of the right time.
Okay, sounds great. And I appreciate you talking to me. We'll talk again.
Thanks, Greg. It was great talking with you too. See you soon.
Again, the Georgia Alliance for Adoptee Rights website is at gaallianceforadopteerights.org. And sign up for the What Next newsletter. Every Tuesday, we send out the show notes as well as any updates and legislative developments around adoptee rights. You can sign up for the newsletter at adopteesunited.org/whatnext. What Next is a production of Adoptees United, Inc., a national nonprofit organization with an unwavering commitment to equality for all adopted people. It is written and produced by me, Gregory Luce, with the financial support of the many people who contribute to Adoptees United. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, and all donations are tax deductible. We'd love for you to follow, subscribe, and listen to us each week wherever you get your podcasts. Consider making a donation to Adoptees United at adopteesunited.org/donate. It'll help us keep this going. Thanks. We'll talk to you next week.